Hello, what is poppin' guys? And in today's video, we are going to be going over basic CSS selectors. So let's open up the same project that we were working on in our previous video, which is this. We have this website over here. And one thing which I mentioned, but I didn't quite get into are these things, these classes. So you can select HTML elements based on the classes. So the way that you do this is like this. The first thing that you'd want to do is to make a CSS file. So you go to new file. Then in this case, we've got a file called styles and then call it index.css, for example. If it's your first one, you can call it index. And then you have to link the style sheet over here. And I'll go into how linking works in a different video. But for now, just copy what I write. Link rel style sheet. href equals index.css. This is assuming that it's not being put inside a folder, so it should all be in the same place relative to one another. So we've linked to our index.css file. So if we wanted to select this, well, actually, let's not select this image because there's not much that we can do with it. Let's select this div, the div with the class card, okay? Yes, okay, so let's select it. So the way that you select a class is, let me actually make a comment over here. This is a class, has a class attribute, okay? So with the way that we would select this class attribute over here is we'd go to our file and we would use the dot to select it. So we would put dot, and in this case, the class is card, so we put dot card. Now we can add some CSS styles. I will get into some basic CSS styles on a different video, but for now, let's just use background dash color and let's just make it red so that we can just see what styling looks like. So we will relaunch our live server using the control. So Control Alt Q, Control Alt L. Now you can see that these two cards are now red. Previously, prior to this, they would look like, they would look like this. They're white, but now when I do this, they are red. So we've selected these two cards using their class. If you inspect element, you take a look at the card, you can see that we've used dot card, so we've selected this class and we've given it a background color of red. Now there's another type of HTML attribute which you can use to select, and this is called the ID attribute. So none of these elements seem to have ID, so I'm going to give this card a specific ID, and let's give it the ID. Let's give it the ID blue. You would not want to name this as an ID. Blue would be a class, and I'll explain why when I discuss class versus IDs a little bit later in this video. So if we give it the ID blue, to select the ID, we use the hashtag. We say hashtag blue, and now let's do background dash color colon blue. And we take a look here. We can see that this one, the card which we've selected with blue, is blue in color. As we can see, background color over blue, and that this ID attribute is working to override the class attribute. This is because IDs are more specific than classes, therefore they work to override classes. Now the last way that we can select HTML elements is by simply typing in the name of the element. So if I wanted to select the UL with the class nav, I could just type in UL, which would actually not just select this one, it would select this one, this one, this one. It would select every single UL. But let's just say that I want to select all of the UL, so I would just type in UL, and I could do background dash color colon red. And now all of the ULs have a background color of red. Again, this looks absolutely terrible. We're just using this to practice selecting elements. Okay, so I'm going to go to our notes in today's video, and I'm just going to write some notes, okay? So we've gone over, let me make this a bit smaller. We've gone over our class selector. So a class, this is selected with a dot, okay? We have our ID, which is selected with a hashtag. And lastly, we have the basic element selector, and this is selected with element tag name. So meaning we would select the UL using the UL name, which is the name of the tag, the UL. Now one last one that I want to go on is, let's say if we wanted to very specifically select something, we want to select the list items, but only the list items that are inside a div inside, which is only the list items which are inside a UL, which is inside a div. So if I wanted to do that, I could use a descendant selector. So this is where I first type in div. So I'm selecting every single div on the page, right? All of these divs are being selected, all of these divs. Now I type in UL, meaning the list, the entire list. So this selects the UL and all of its descendants. This list, well, it selects the UL. It doesn't select all of the descendants. And then if I want to select all of these list items, I would type li. Then I can do background dash color colon purple. And let's take a look. I'm not sure if purple is actually going to work. Yes, but purple does work, and you can see that all of the list items have now been selected in purple. So those are the 4 selectors that we've gone over today. Now I'm going to explain to you which one to use when, okay? So the ID selector, you want to, the last one was descendant element selector that we went over. I'm just going to do this real quick. Selected through multiple elements tag names. So this is where you go from the first element, so the div, then you navigate to the UL, then you navigate to the list item, and then you set the background color to purple. Now I will describe when. So a class is when you want to style multiple elements with the same give multiple elements same styling. Give multiple elements same styling. Multiple elements same styling. For example, over here we have this class card, and card describes this div and this div because these both have the same, at least initial styling. Then we have the ID. So you want to limit the use of IDs. You only want to use an ID if you have a style to a specific element, So meaning, if I have this element as the ID blue, I cannot have another element on this page with the same ID of blue. So it's a very specific selector and will override class, override the class selector. And it will also override the elements and descendant selectors as well. It doesn't override, it overrides element and descendant selectors. And then the element selector, you would prefer to use class, but if you want to style every single element the same way on a page, so if you want to style all of the same types of elements, same type of element, the same way on a page, you would use this, same way on a page. So if you wanted every single list item to have a purple background, you could just select list item. So let's do this. Let me delete these 2 selectors, list item, and then I could just do background dash color and then purple. Now every single list item on this page would have a purple background color, as we can see over here. Now these ones over here do not have a purple. However, you can see that these over here have not been changed to purple, and this is because these elements have been selected via a class descendant selector. So they first selected the class.skills, then they selected the list items, then they've used the nth child selector, which just selects the child based on the number. We can read more about this in Mozilla Developer Network, and I will explain how to use that in a bit. So this is why this style is overriding our list item style. As we can see, it's being crossed out, meaning it's being overridden. And lastly, we had descendant selector. So I think we already went over descendant selectors. So descendant, this just means selecting an element using previous, using parent elements. And this is actually a thing that I want to emphasize a bit on, parent elements and child elements, especially when you go into doing this with other programming languages like JavaScript and things like that. So if I have a list item, the parent of this list item would be considered the UL. The unordered list would be considered the parent of this list item because it's directly above it. Like the list item is inside this. Then this would be like the grandparent. You can kind of think of this almost like a family tree in a way, with these being like, so the sibling of the div class may nav would be this header over here. You can kind of think of it like that, and it's actually a very helpful way to think about it because it helps you to sort of trace and use descendant selectors more effectively. Okay, now that I've got that done, there are more CSS selectors, and I will likely make another video going over these selectors. And if you're curious on these selectors, Mozilla Developer Network has a great CSS library. So let's go here, Mozilla Developer Network and CSS Selectors. They have a great thing on this. Yep, CSS Selectors, cascading. They have a list of all of the CSS selectors on the side. And so, obviously you have your basic type selectors, which I just refer to as the element selectors, but type is actually a more correct way to say it. This is very helpful, handy. It explains to you how to use the selector and what the selector does. Always take a look at these reference sheets. If you can't navigate to it, then just type in this URL up top. Yeah, I hope that you found this video helpful. I think we're pretty much done with this, at least first part. I might make another part going over more advanced selectors. I hope you found this helpful. Here is our notes again if you would like to take a look at them. Anyways, hope you found this helpful. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.